Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well. We got another JJ McCullough video, and today we're looking at ranking the 100 greatest Americans ever. Now, I am an American, so I would say I'm sort of qualified, but maybe not totally qualified. I don't want to perceive any bias in this because a lot of times when we look at biases of the list, it's always rooted in something political or something drawn from other events that may have occurred within a time frame. Now, given there's 100 slots, we're probably not just going to see political or presidential, because obviously we only had like 44 or 45 presidents in our time in our time span as a country. So there's got to be a lot of people in the cultural aspect, as well as maybe intellectual, educational, maybe militaristic. We will see. Glad you're here. Please, as we get through this list, remember it's just a list. We'll comment on some that we know, some that we don't know. We might not comment on. I'm hoping to know all of them, but I guarantee you there'll probably be at least 10 of them I'm not too sure about. That's the beauty of learning, I guess. Also, if you guys think there was anyone that was specifically left off this list that you should or we should have included, please comment below. But let's just jump right in, shall we?
A couple of weeks ago, I made a video about the greatest people in history as determined by a series of TV contests that were held in countries around the world in the early 2000s. The American version of this was a show called Greatest Americans, and it aired on the Discovery Channel in the year 2005. The way it worked is that the show...
I remember it was Ronald Reagan at the top, and I was just so recency biased given his death the previous year.
Did a survey of the American public in which they were asked to name the greatest American who had ever lived, and then they revealed the top 100 most popular choices. They then had a second round of voting to re-rank the top 10, and spoiler alert, Ronald Reagan won. Anyway, today I thought we would dive a little bit deeper into the results of this 15-year-old survey, which, despite being 15 years old, is still one of the most comprehensive efforts to document the greatest Americans that has ever been done. So let us take a closer look at the sort of people who made it into the top 100.
All right, so given it's 2005, we can imagine anybody that came of prominence after 2005 are not going to be on this list, like modern presidents or athletes or other qualifiers. We do know that there's a lot of populism within all this. Like it's a popularity contest versus a a contest based in merit. So let's just, what we'll do, we'll make this fun. We'll agree or disagree if they are a top 100 American based off of my opinion. And you guys do the same. Let's go.
How has our definition of what is a great American changed over the last decade and a half? Who did we think was great back then that we maybe think is not so great now? And who were some of the most obscure or dated choices that made it in? So let us get into it. So, the top 10 went like this. Ronald Reagan in first place, Abraham Lincoln in second, Martin Luther King Jr. in third, George Washington in fourth, and Ben Franklin in fifth. So far, relatively uncontroversial.
Yeah, all those are good choices for the top 100. We're not going to comment on the placement because we'll be here all day. We're not going to comment on the placement of each, just because it's gonna vary.
Right? Well, except for maybe Reagan being in first place. As I said in my first video, at the time that this survey was done, Reagan had only died a year earlier, which was treated as this very big deal and sort of resulted in an outpouring of Reagan nostalgia across America.
All Millard Fillmore schools are now Ronald Reagans. The Mississippi River is now the Mississippi Reagan.
And my good friend Frankenstein is now Franken Reagan.
But on the other hand, Reagan was also very popular, even in his own time.
Yes.
And he is still, to this day, ranked very highly when Americans or American historians are asked to name the greatest ever presidents.
And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of optics of that time. I mean, the Soviet Union, we were in a Cold War for 40 years, and towards the Soviet Union, honestly, it fell in his successors. George H.W. Bush, his presidency is when the Soviet Union actually fell. However, a lot of the optics shows that how Reagan defeated the Soviet Union, given Star Wars, the Cold War, a lot of stuff like that, as well as there was obviously the populism of 1984 with that astounding victory in the Electoral College, as well as other things. You know, you look at Reagan, you really see like a shining star of Americanism. So that could be rooted in a lot of that. So let's keep going.
More controversial, however, was George W. Bush.
Yeah, a top 100 of all time. I can see him making that list. I can see pretty much every president making the top 100. Now, of course, there's going to be rooted conversation in that, because there are horrible things, there are good things that each president does. But I can see the presidents making the list. However, I can see this one being an Effie.
Being in 6th place, who was the current president of the United States at the time. Bush today is, I feel, not regarded all that well, even among fellow Republicans.
No.
But in 2005, he had just been reelected less than a year ago, and partisan politics being what it is, a lot of Republicans were still very fiercely loyal to him. This is an important thing to keep in mind these days when people sometimes freak out about how popular Donald Trump is with Republicans. The fact is, all presidents tend to be very popular with partisans of their own side,
yes,
and it can take a while for these feelings to melt away.
I'd say like 2 generations to really understand things. So like maybe today, the 70s and the 80s, we're just now getting a lot of that data back to understand, are these policies net good or net bad for the American people, given, you know, I would say a good starting point would be Reagan and back. Anything forward than that, it's just too recent to really understand the effects. Now, there are some things that we can speak up faster than others, like the Iraq War. Was that necessary? Probably not. So it has some nuance to it.
Case in point, greatest American number 7, Bill Clinton, who,
like I said, every president probably should make this list, but there is opportunity to say that, yeah.
at that time was the most recent Democrat president.
Yes.
After Clinton came Elvis and then Oprah, who I don't think it is a stretch to say are 2 of the biggest American celebrities of all time. You can tell because they only need a first name. Then in 10th place, we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yeah.
The Democratic president associated with getting America out of the Great Depression and leading the country through World War II. All right, so that was the top 10, but now let us talk about the rest of the top 25, which in some ways I think was actually less controversial. It's in numbers 11 through 25 that you get some of the real cliched famous Americans, including Thomas Jefferson, Walt Disney, JFK, Thomas Edison, Muhammad Ali.
Are we not going to show all of them?
Rosa Parks, the Wright brothers, and Neil Armstrong. There are maybe a couple of controversial picks, however. Number 11, for instance, was the preacher Billy Graham.
That's a little greatest American of all time? I don't think so.
Graham is considered a leading figure in the American evangelical Christian revival of the 1960s onward. It is a movement that has had tremendous impact in American culture and politics, and is actually something I am working on a whole other video about. But that being said, while the evangelical Christian movement is a controversial thing in modern America, and always has been, Billy Graham has long had a reputation as like the one evangelical everyone could agree on. He was a spiritual advisor to presidents of both parties, and particularly as he got older, he sort of earned a reputation as being a much friendlier, milder, more moderate, less ideological, and less combative figure than evangelical preachers often have a reputation for being. Number 20, meanwhile, was Lance Armstrong. Now this is a good example.
I mean, I don't hate that just because of all the money he raised for cancer.
of a choice that has not aged well. Lance Armstrong was, of course, an extremely successful professional cyclist who won the Tour de France a record 7 times between 1999 and 2005. During the early 2000s, he was undeniably one of the most beloved Americans of his time, not just for his athletic prowess, but also for his very brave and high-profile battle with testicular cancer. If you lived through that time, I'm sure you very much remember his whole Live Strong anti-cancer fundraising movement. Now, there had long been rumors, particularly in the French media, that Armstrong was using performance-enhancing drugs.
So was everybody else.
But these charges were easily dismissed as just the French being salty that an American was better at their thing.
I've never heard that. I've never heard that they have been dismissed.
Than they were. There was a lot of anti-French sentiment in the US in those days. But then, in 2012, a bombshell investigation by the United States Anti-Doping Agency revealed that Armstrong had, in fact, been using performance-enhancing drugs, and Lance himself eventually confessed everything to Greatest American number 9.
Did you ever take banned substances to enhance your cycling performance?
Yes.
In your opinion, was it humanly possible to win the Tour de France without doping 7 times in a row?
Not in my opinion.
So he was stripped of all of his awards and prestige and is now probably one of the greatest disgraced Americans of all.
Okay, yeah, you shouldn't cheat. That's obvious, but he did raise a ton of money for cancer research.
Time. Henry Ford is also on the list in 24th place.
Henry Ford's an interesting one, given his alignment with the Third Reich. However, he did mobilize the Ford Motor Company and revolutionize with the assembly line. So I would say, yeah, he is a top 100 person.
He is, of course, best known as the inventor of the modern automobile and the founder of the Ford Motor Company. But he also has a fairly dark reputation these days because of how anti-Semitic he was. So he's certainly someone who's a little dodgy to like too openly. It is in the list of the final 75 greatest Americans that we really start to find some odd choices, however.
Okay.
For whatever reason, the Discovery Channel never released the rank order of the final 75, so all we have is a giant pile of names of famous Americans who are, like, broadly popular.
So either number 26 to 100. Okay.
But not exactly top tier in terms of greatness. So the biggest subcategory of people in the bottom 75 is basically what we could just call showbiz people. People like Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, Katharine Hepburn, Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, George Lucas, Marilyn Monroe. Basically all of the most iconic Hollywood big shots. A couple of now disgraced people are in here too, of course.
Oh, yeah, this is 2005, so I imagine we're going to see like a Bill Cosby, some others that are escaping me.
Like convicted sex criminal Bill Cosby and noted anti-Semitic lunatic Mel Gibson. But back...
Mel Gibson. I haven't heard too much about that, so we'll have to dive deeper in that. I'm not too sure, not too keen on what's going on with Mel Gibson.
In 2005, people were still in a lot of denial about all of this. The most interesting minor Hollywood person of the time who made it into the bottom 75 is probably Ellen DeGeneres. In 2005, Ellen had basically just started her talk show, so this is a rare example of a pick that has actually aged well, since I would say Ellen has...
Sorta. This video probably came out long after her recent scandals of just being mean. It's really what it turns out to be. But yeah.
Has only become more famous and more beloved over the last 15 years. I could easily see her making it into the top 25 if they did this poll today.
No.
There are a lot fewer musicians than you might expect. Only Frank Sinatra, Ray Charles, Madonna, and Michael Jackson. Can you think of some notable American musicians who are missing? Let me know in the comments. After entertainment people, the next largest category is politicians, which is mostly just like every president of the last 100 years. 3 first ladies.
how are we not going to have Eleanor Roosevelt, though? She's the greatest first lady of all time.
Made it in as well. Eleanor
popular,
Roosevelt,
like I
who
said.
is often considered to have been the greatest first lady of all time.
Wait, what did you
Eleanor
say?
Roosevelt, president of the last
Can you
100
just say
years.
exactly what I
3
said?
first ladies made it in as well. Eleanor Roosevelt,
Literally.
who is often considered to have been the greatest first lady of all time, made it into the top 25, in case you were wondering.
Oh, nice.
But once you get beyond the presidents, basically every politician in the bottom 75 are terribly myopic choices that have not aged well at all. So, for example, we have Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice,
Okay, we're just picking the cabinet of the current president at that point.
the 2 secretaries of state in the George W. Bush administration. Both were the highest ranking African Americans in the history of the US government up to that point. But today, both are probably better known for their close association with the planning of the 2003 US invasion of Iraq. That war was still relatively popular circa 2005, but today it is not something that anyone really wants to take credit for. Former Senator John Edwards, who was Democrat John Kerry's
Not too
vice
sure,
presidential nominee in the
okay.
2004 presidential election, somehow made it in as well. John
A lot of recency bias here.
Kerry himself, however, did not. At the time, John Edwards was seen as this dynamic, young up-and-comer in the Democratic Party. But then, in 2011, he became horribly disgraced when it was revealed that he had been using campaign funds to cover up an affair he was having while his
lovely.
wife was dying of
Very
cancer.
lovely.
He ultimately got off on criminal charges, but I don't think anyone knows or cares what he's up to these days. Rudy
Wow.
Giuliani also made
Oh, no.
it in. He was mayor of New York City during 9/11
I mean, he was a good mayor.
and was a heroic symbol of American resilience for many years after.
Yeah,
but you
he
know,
was a good
these
mayor.
days he is probably better known for being the most high-profile member of President Trump's legal defense team and his, shall we say, less than eloquent TV performances.
Shut up, moron. Shut up.
Okay.
But there were some fairly prescient political inclusions as well, such as a certain recently elected junior senator from
That's, yeah. In 2004, he had an amazing speech on the DNC conference. But, yeah. He would be a slam dunk top 100 because he's a president. But he was one of the more eloquent presidents of the 2000s. There is a lot of things that are going to come out in the next 15, 20 years that will be not so great for him, given the drone warfare that was reluctantly not... I'm sorry. Let me find my words. There's going to be some things that come out in the next 10 to 15 years that are at surface level, that are going to go deeper into just the unimaginable loss of life of third world country citizens given our drone program. And if you watch Snowden, which is an amazing movie, you can see how this exacerbates the what do you call it? The this is why I should do caffeine before these videos and not do them so early in the morning. But basically, the bill that came out right after 9/11 that allowed, you guys know what I'm talking about, allowed pretty much surveillance and on the home front as well as abroad on a massive scale, which resulted in the future to future technologies like drone warfare. Like I said, exacerbated under Barack Obama. But a lot of recent politics cannot be microscoped too fondly until more data comes out and more uncovers. But yeah,
Illinois, or a certain New York businessman who had recently started his
DJ
own
Trump?
reality show. But once you get beyond
Yep.
the politicians, most of the remaining picks are relatively uncontroversial. So you got George Washington Carver,
yep,
Amelia Earhart,
yep.
John Glenn, Steve Jobs, Michael Jordan, Malcolm X.
Where's the other Armstrong? I can't believe Lance Armstrong made it higher up than Neil Armstrong or Alan Shepard, perhaps.
Brett Favre.
Brett Favre. Yeah, I don't think he would be top 100 today.
I wish I knew more about football.
Tom Brady, probably, but not Brett Favre.
Is he still considered a big deal? Tom Brady isn't on the list, and I feel that would never ever happen today. Joe
That's crazy because in 2005 he had already had 2 Super Bowls.
Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, made it on, I assume because a lot of Mormons voted for him. I feel like his reputation among non-Mormons isn't very high, however. He's probably more likely to be known as a serial polygamist as anything else. So here are two people on the list that I was not super familiar with, but you can see if you recognize their names. Audie Murphy and Chuck Yeager.
They sound familiar. Chuck Yeager looks like he's in the military, given that uniform. But a lot of people were in the military back then. They look and sound like actor names, especially Audie Murphy with that headshot. That's like a classic old actor headshot. So I'm gonna say Audie Murphy. Let's. I mean, we're not doing anything, guys. Let's chill real quick. Let's see. Audie Murphy. Who is that? I'm gonna say he's an actor. Let's see. Audie Murphy was also a soldier, and he was a national legend. He lied about his age to enlist in the World War II. He had the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Hearts. I can't talk. 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts. My God. And the French and Belgian decorations as well. Then he became a movie star, appearing in 40 films. All right. Okay, yeah, so that makes perfect sense. So he was an American legend through and through in the military and actor. Chuck Yeager, like I said, military uniform. He was in the Air Force, actually. He was actually the first person to break the sound barrier. Interesting. Okay, yeah, so that was them.
So, Audie Murphy, I have learned, was a heroic American
I could have literally waited a second.
soldier from World War II, famous for winning basically all of the medals, as you can see in this photo. According to the New York Times, his daring exploits seem almost like a video game caricature. He is said to have killed more than 200 Nazis. For this, Murphy became one of the most famous men in America immediately after the war. For a while, he tried to be a movie star, but he never
he started in 40 films.
Achieved much success in that realm. Then in
I think he did, given what I saw.
1971, he abruptly died in a plane crash. The impression I get is that Audie Murphy was a very iconic figure for a certain older generation of American, and then when that generation lost its cultural influence, Murphy sort of faded from the national imagination. I mean, I have collected a lot of books about famous 20th century Americans over the years, and I could not find a single reference to Audie Murphy in any of them. But I guess a lot of old folks watch the Discovery Channel. Chuck Yeager, meanwhile, is a much more famous guy, although his fame is also very tied up in one particular generational moment. Yeager was a fighter pilot during World War II, and in 1947, he test flew a new rocket-powered jet known as the X-1 at an unprecedented speed of over 700 miles per hour, faster than the speed of sound.
This flight marks the first milestone in the supersonic chapter in the
47 jets were not that common at that time. The Germans had mastered jet building only a couple of years before that.
history of aviation. And you were there.
Chuck Yeager is actually still alive, although he is getting close to 100 at this point. For the last few decades, he's been this sort of good-natured guy who gives speeches and interviews and things about the historic moment that he was part of. The good-natured former pilot who was part of some historic moment is a kind of fun type of
He actually died in 2020.
American celebrity, don't you think? All right, now let us talk about the person who I consider to be the most obscure in the top 100. The name that I would say makes the whole list feel the most dated. Patrick Tillman. Has anyone under 30 ever heard of
Patrick Tillman? It sounds like he played football.
Tillman? He was a professional football player from the Arizona Cardinals who famously quit the NFL to volunteer for the U.S. Army after 9/11.
Yes.
And then he was killed in Afghanistan in 2004. And for a brief period, he was really held up as a symbol of patriotic sacrifice in the post 9/11 era.
I mean, think about it. regardless, by the way, Afghanistan is considered the good war. Iraq is considered the bad war. It's actually like a contrast between the two in early 2000s. So interestingly enough, but yeah, think about it. You're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars to play a sport, and you say, no, I'm going to risk my life to fight for something I believe in. That is true heroism, I would say. Unfortunately, he did pass.
Today, however, we know that Tillman died because he was accidentally shot to death by fellow U.S. soldiers.
I did not know that.
In this very tragic and confused confrontation in which he was mistaken for the enemy, which was a much less grand story than what the military had originally put out.
I mean, a lot of people have succumbed from friendly fire. A lot of people. So it's just part of war, unfortunately.
Which is that he had been shot by the Taliban while storming up a hill with a machine gun to defend his fellow men below. Once the truth came out, a lot of people felt very deceived by the way that the military had initially propagandized his death, and there were congressional hearings about it and everything.
Really?
The full scandal of the Pat Tillman tragedy was only really starting to become mainstream knowledge around the time that the Greatest American TV competition was happening, which is why his inclusion in this list feels very dark in retrospect. Anyway, let me try to lighten the mood a bit with a closing assignment for you all. Imagine that the Discovery Channel did a...
He's gonna say, what would you guys say today? Yeah, this list is hogwash. Oh, because if maybe one day we'll create a list here. Like we'll make a video, we'll make a tier, or we'll do something. Because I've always wanted to make content besides just reaction channel content. I might make that members only or something on this channel, just for fun. But I think one thing, or I might make it public. We'll figure that out. But I think one thing that's interesting is today, if we were to remove like no one born after 2000. Sorry, no one. I would say we could make one by the century. I think that feels a little bit more honest. Like if we could have a 20th century greatest Americans, or 18th century greatest Americans, and a 19th century greatest Americans. 18th century will be pretty much laid out by the founding fathers and the framers and other people in that mindset. The 19th century, a lot of presidents and a lot of innovators, a lot of icons and whatnot. The 20th century will probably be a lot of pop culture rooted with presidents and other things as well. I think that would be a little bit more honest in the fact of like we can't. It's hard to compare someone. Like it's hard to compare a Bill Clinton to George Washington, guys. Like it's hard. It's very, very hard to do that because each individual had several different circumstances that they were trying to attack. Now you could make it a total list, but it would be needed to have some guardrails for it to actually be rooted in merit. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please comment below, argue below. I don't care. Tell me what you think. Who on this list just makes no sense. And who would be your top 5 Americans of all time? That's what I would like to see. What would be your top 5 Americans? I'll need to think about mine. Thank you guys so much. Until next time. Peace out.